Hi, and I'm Mr. Tapley here to walk you through the Semester 2 CAT, your letter to Australian Parliament as part of your Global Citizenship unit. In this video, I will be explaining the instructions for the CAT, going through the CAT file itself, so the template that we're looking at right now. I'll be going over the CAT rubric, so each of these different rubric descriptors or criterion, what you're being assessed on. I'll go over those in a bit of detail, and I'll also provide just a little bit of general feedback on the dev, just a few tips and tricks on what we can all do better. It's important that you read your personal individual dev feedback. However, there are a few key themes, common patterns that we can look at in terms of improving response before the CAT. So, in this CAT, you will be required to construct a letter to a member of Australian Parliament, discussing a global issue and outlining our national efforts in practicing global citizenship. So that's the title of this whole unit, really, is Australia an effective global citizen? Are we doing enough to solve these global problems? Do we need to do more? Do we need to do things differently? You're not just describing the issue, you are evaluating, you are analyzing. Here's the problem, and here's what we need to do. And is Australia being a global citizen? It's up to you guys to tell us. Using the information gathered from your research, support resources, so that's your textbook, your class slides, the letter template, the plan itself, and then the feedback from your Semester 2 dev. Complete your letter to Parliament in the space provided below. Please remember to include your updated resource list at the end of the file. The CAT rubric is attached to the assignment in Google Classroom and Compass Learning Tasks, depending on what platform your teacher, your class is using. The CAT file has included a basic structure, a guide of how to complete your letter. You may use the sentence starters provided to scaffold your response. It's not mandatory. You will not lose marks if, for example, you do not start paragraph 1 with, I am writing to you to discuss this global issue. These are just suggestions, guidelines. I know that Ms. Siros is putting together a very large list of sentence starters, of writing strategies to help you guys with your letter. So thank you to her for providing that to her classes and to others. But these are just little guidelines for, okay, this is what I'm talking about in this paragraph. You don't have to use it, but feel free to use the template provided below. So what I might do is just go through each section of the letter. As you can see, it's literally the dev letter template. I've even used the same color scheme. So I'm going to go through each section of this and then talk about what we can improve upon in the dev before going over the CAT rubric in greater detail. So, introduction. Dear government official, important that you write down the correct government official, the correct minister. So if your letter is talking about refugees and doing more to help refugees and asylum seekers, don't send your letter to the Minister for Agriculture, for farming. Make sure that you've gone to that APH website, you've looked down the list, and you've found the relevant minister for your topic. I'm writing to you to discuss your global issue. So in this introduction here, it's only going to be 2 or 3 sentences, and that's when you would maybe offer a very brief definition of your topic, but paragraph 1 is where you actually talk about it in more detail. So you don't need to put all of your information, all of your research into that intro. 2 or 3 sentences at the start where you say, g'day mates, this is what I'm talking to you about. By the way, this is what that is, and this is where you provide all the information. So paragraph 1, outline the global issue. Explain your topic, causes, define key terms, etc., etc. I think most students really did well in this first paragraph, at least in my classes. I found that the description of the topic was fairly detailed. You guys were using proper terminology, so defining key terms. This second point here is probably what I'd highlight. So paragraph 1, you're outlining the issue and why I should care. Why is it significant to Australia and the world? What is the connection to this? Because if you're discussing refugees and asylum seekers and yada, 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 the person reading it's going to say, but yeah, why have you sent this to me? Why have you sent this to the Minister of Foreign Affairs or something like that? So I need to very briefly describe why it's important to Australia and why it's important to the world, because that's the connection here that we're going for. Not just the Australian response, we're talking about global citizenship. So when you talk about your issue, why is it significant to Australia? And why is it significant to the world? That's probably the feedback I'd highlight for paragraph 1. Paragraph 2. The feature I would highlight here is something in Google Classroom called plagiarism check. So in paragraph 2, this is where I'm going to see a lot of numbers and names, hopefully. So it's the consequences or the impact of your global issue. So paragraph 1, What is the problem? Paragraph 2, numbers, evidence, statistics, impact. So impact of your global issue and failure to address these concerns. So what is the current impact? And then what is the future impact if we don't do anything? So if this happens today, it's going to kill this many people. It's going to cost this many dollars. But if we don't do anything in the future, by 2030, this is going to happen. So that's what you're talking about in this paragraph. Realistically, you're talking about numbers and names throughout your letter. So you're using evidence, not just in this paragraph, but in the entire letter. However, there's going to be a lot of numbers and names in this second paragraph. The issue that I had with this paragraph in terms of dev feedback, y'all had a lot of information, which is fine. I'd also probably say at the start, this letter shouldn't be any longer than 2 pages. It's 1 to 2 pages. I don't want an essay that's 9 pages long, 1 to 2 pages maximum. Otherwise, I guarantee the person reading it, whether it's your teacher or the Prime Minister of Australia, is going to fall asleep. It's hard to keep our attention for a 7-page essay. It doesn't matter how much information you're putting in there. It needs to be quality information, relevant information. Otherwise, we're going to have to work too hard to dig through it, and you're going to lose the engagement of your reader. Anyway, so the information was quantity. I want it to be quality, so make sure it's the best information. It's the most relevant information to your argument, to your contention. What I found with paragraph 2 was that a lot of people weren't really including their words. So in Google Classroom, there's a feature called plagiarism check, which can direct your teacher, however bad their eyesight might be, to the direct website where that information has been sourced from. So it's important that you guys write this stuff out in your own words. We've known you for a while now. Some of you we taught in year 7 and year 8. We know what you sound like. We know what your writing is like. So if I see someone use that word, I'm like, whoa, I can't even spell that word. I doubt they know what that word means. I'm going to click the plagiarism check feature, and it's going to show me, oh, this person's just gone Control-C, Control-V. We're putting a bit of trust in you guys by letting you type this up as opposed to handwrite it. Don't abuse that trust. Please write things out in your own words. You're allowed to use those websites to get some inspiration from, but you should be writing these things out in your own language. So that's my advice for paragraph 2. Paragraph 3, global citizenship. So this is almost your conclusion. That's your conclusion, but this is where you evaluate, I should say. This is where you evaluate, is Australia meeting our global responsibilities? So explain, are we practicing global citizenship? Yes, no, why? What can we do to solve the problem? So Australia has a global responsibility to help this issue because Australia has demonstrated a commitment to this issue by, and that's where you talk about our current actions. So whatever government policies we have, this is the paragraph where you'd be talking a lot about the United Nations SDG, so your Sustainable Development Goals. The other thing I would say for this paragraph here, please reference the UN SDG that is relevant to this topic. However, the UN SDGs are quite large, quite broad. So for some of them, solve poverty, but then there are like 6 sub-goals or 6 sub-criterion. So for this topic, you might want to figure out specifically what specific goal you're looking at. So there's water scarcity is one of the topics. So you might want to look at specifically what part of water scarcity you're looking at. So be specific here. If you're having trouble with this paragraph, that's my advice, is laser focus in on one part of the UN SDG that you're looking at. You don't have to address the entire thing. Australia's demonstrated commitment to this. And then you offer up some solutions, so some recommendations. Then we will set a national example of global citizenship. So you're evaluating, is Australia a global citizen? Yes or no? And then explain why. We aren't a global citizen because this is our responsibility according to the UN SDG. This is what we're doing. It's not good enough. But this is what we could be doing, you idiot, to solve the problem. And then conclusion. Similar length to the introduction. Please consider what I've discussed, and this is important, outline action. So what are you asking the government minister to do? Because if you haven't got this conclusion at the end, the person reading it's going to say, oh, that was nice, and then walk off. This is where you demand, this is where you request that specific action, specific changes need to take place. We need to do what I've suggested here to be a new and improved global citizen. So make sure you are outlining specific action, or you are asking a specific question. So if we're not doing something here, conclusion, why aren't we doing it? Or if you want something to happen here, conclusion, Here's what you're going to do, mate. This is what you need to do to solve the problem. And then you're done. Oops, almost done. Resource list. So record your sources used to collect research for the cat. We were going to have you guys do a nice fancy bibliography with Harvard-style referencing or Chicago-style referencing. However, in light of the little old global pandemic that we're going through, we don't want to put any extra stress and pressure on you guys. So you just need to, similar to the dev, list out the resources that you are using for the cat. What I found, again, a little bit of feedback from the dev, was that a lot of students use the starter pack, so the resources that we suggested you could use from the UN SDGs and other websites. That's fine, but you need to include a variety of sources, and I'll go over that when we get to the rubric. So make sure you've got a number of different sources, a number of different types of sources. Don't just rely on quick little YouTube videos, or don't just rely on one Australian government website. So variety and a quantity of resources there. Doesn't have to be official Harvard referencing, as long as you have the name and the title, so the title of the website and the title of the URL. As long as we can find that reference that you've used to authenticate that it is correct and to authenticate that this person hasn't plagiarized. Cool. So that's the cat file. Now, the important one, the rubric. If I hear a single student ask me, "Oh, Mr. Tapley, what was the rubric?" Or, "Oh, Mr. Tapley, what are we being graded on?" I'll be very upset. You should be looking at the rubric before you start, while you're going through each section, and while you are about to press submit on the cat. You need to constantly check your rubric. It doesn't matter how amazing your response is, or how much effort you put in, how much time, how many words it is. If you're not doing what the rubric's asking for, you're not going to get a good result that really reflects your understanding of the topic. It's like if the rubric asks me to make a car and I make $1 million jet airplane, it's like, cool, well done. You're failing though. You didn't do what I wanted. So make sure you read the rubric throughout the process. Have it open in a separate tab, print it out, put it up on the wall, stick it on your head, stick it on your brother's head, something close by you can look at throughout the day. Now, the dev was fairly straightforward in terms of its assessment grading scale. It was just high, medium, low. The cat will be officially assessed on your report, so it's going to be the GBC grading scale of outstanding, excellent, very good, good, very, very, very. And then these numbers here, those represent your Vic Carrick, so your grades at Glennie, and then your grades compared to the rest of the Victorian state. And then these different boxes on the left here are your rubric descriptors, or the rubric criterion sections, whatever you want to call it. So you're being assessed officially on your knowledge of the issue, whether or not you have evaluated if Australia is practicing global citizenship, whether or not you have a clear contention and clear arguments throughout your letter, your research, your evidence, the language and communication that you are using throughout the letter, and then finally, your planning and your preparation. So there's a lot of words here. I'm not going to read through all of them, otherwise this will be a 30-minute video, but I will talk about very briefly what we're looking for in each of these criterion. And you can see we've underlined a few keywords here, so that should give you some idea on what you are expected to do in each of these sections. So the first thing we're assessing you on is your knowledge. The key things here, to make sure you're up here, not down here, make sure you've got detail. Make sure it is clear. I don't want to just see 4,000 random facts and statistics. It needs to be clear information, detailed information, and the arguments that you are creating need to be detailed. They need to be specific. They need to be related to the topic, connected to the topic. You can't just be like, this is my topic, and I'm going to talk to you now about food security. Or this is my topic about water scarcity, and I'm going to talk to you about how rich the Democratic Republic of Congo is. It needs to be connected. So insightful arguments and claims, clarity and detail. And at the end, again, we're asking you in the conclusion to request a specific response, a specific action from the person reading it, the Parliament Minister. So detail and clarity for that knowledge one. Evaluate the extent to which Australia is practicing global citizenship. Are you talking about Australian government policy? Are you talking about what we've done in foreign aid in other countries to help people out in terms of this topic? And then are you referencing, of course, the UN SDGs? The letter effectively evaluates the extent to which Australia is acting as a global citizen. So that's the main thing here. The main thing that differentiates this from this and this is this part here, whether or not you are evaluating. If at some point in your letter you say, Australia, you did good, or Australia, you did bad on this topic, I can tick you off for that. So make sure you evaluate at the end of your letter, is Australia a global citizen? Yes, no, why? Establishing a contention. A clear contention, a point of view. We guys worked quite hard on this in our history essay, so you guys should know what it means to have a contention. You need to have an opinion. You need to have a point of view. A clear contention has been maintained throughout the letter. This creates a coherent and persuasive progression of arguments relevant to the issue and connected to the contention. So in the introduction, I'm writing to you to discuss. This is where you would list your contention. So I'm writing to you to discuss the issue of refugees and asylum seekers in Australia. I believe more needs to be done. We need to do more on this topic. And here's why. And that's when you talk about the issue, you talk about why it's important to Australia and the world, talk about the consequences, and then, technology, not my first language. And then you evaluate whether or not Australia has done enough on this topic. So that's how you demonstrate your contention. Throughout the letter, I need to remember this is their topic, this is their opinion, and these arguments are all related, they're all connected, they're all linked back to that contention. So it's not necessarily teal throughout each of these paragraphs, but you need to make sure that you're linking everything back to your point of view, to your opinion about this topic. Next one, research and evidence. This one is all about the quality of evidence that you're using. So is the evidence accurate, detailed, and have you got it from a number of, not just sources, not just like, Mr. Tapley, I've got 1,000 sources, what do you think? It needs to be reliable sources. I don't want to see Johnny Smith's Weebly from Glen Waverley Primary School in Year 5. That's not really a reliable source. It needs to be accurate, it needs to be relevant to your topic. So it's quality research in this box here. Language and communication. It's about using the letter format, the structure we've provided effectively. So if, for example, you introduce your topic in the introduction, that makes sense. If in paragraph 3 you say, oh, by the way, this is my topic, that's not really the format and the structure we're after. If in paragraph 1 you start talking about the impact of climate change and you haven't even defined climate change yet, or why it's important to Australia, then that again is not good structure and formatting. So use the guidelines we're providing. Language, you're not talking to some mate on the schoolyard, you're talking to a government minister. So you want to be formal. You want to create a persuasive message by using emotive words, emotive techniques. You guys have done lots of writing techniques in English, and Miss Seros will hopefully give us a nice list of writing strategies. So we'll ask her nicely for that. And then finally, planning and preparation. Similar to the history cut, your dev, your plan, is actually going to be part of your assessment as a way of holding you guys accountable for the dev and for also demonstrating how important that planning template is for your CAT. So the letter template demonstrates a high level of effort and planning. This one here, though, is what I want to talk about. Too many times I'm writing feedback into 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. in the early hours in the morning, and then the student doesn't do that in the CAT. So it's very important to read the feedback and then act upon it. So if in the dev feedback it says, okay, I need more resources, got it. And then I look at your CAT resource list and there's nothing that's changed, you're not going to do well on this criterion here. So you need to implement some sort of edits or changes or additions, or you need to ask questions about the feedback so I can guide you on where to go, on how to improve your CAT response. And that's all I've got to say.